uns zusammen die Geschichte über den schweinkopfigen Hund und dem lieben Red Baron.
Okay, well, I've dug the monitor out, and it does have a little bit of Asteroid Deluxe burn, as you can see, with the extra ships. But the rest of it looks pretty well burn free, except for one thing. It does have a couple scratches on the glass, but I'm not concerned about that. But what I am concerned with, and I don't know if you can see it or not, is that the surface has a bunch of little black dots all on the screen. And I'm pretty sure that what that is monitor burn from where the game was malfunctioning, and all the scan lines were visible on the monitor, and the little points are plot points, you know, between the lines. And as you can see, it's peppered with quite a few of them. So evidently this monitor had been left on in a broken down state for quite a while. But then again, I don't know, maybe it doesn't take long for those little burn places to burn in. But that's the only issue I see. We'll just have to wait till we get it working and fire it up to see how that's going to affect what the picture looks like. If I have to, I'll get a new tube for it. I think I can get one. I've seen one on eBay for like somewhere around $200 range, which isn't bad for a new tube, I guess, considering that they don't make them anymore. The rest of the monitor, this definitely looked like it has had a rough life. But the good news is it's all complete. Looks like it's got the original board, or at least it's the V2000 board, I'm pretty sure. And it's got the high voltage unit, and everything is hooked up and attached. So we ought to be able to work with it and get something going, as long as the yoke is good. And ought to be able to get something going here. So that's the start. We're going to try to clean it off. Cleaned it up a little bit already, got the spider webs off of it and a little bit of the dust, but got a little more cleaning I want to do before I take it inside. I don't want to bring any surprises in there with me. I don't like spiders, so we need to try to de-spider it as much as we can. So that's where we're at so far. Okay, well, I've taken the deflection board out of the monitor. It's a V2000, and have a Bob Roberts cap kit. It has the transistors, deflection transistors in it. So we're going to install it. Came with this list of the capacitors and the location numbers. So we're going to install that. Also, we have for the V2000 deflection board replacement pot kit from the real Bob Roberts. So the pots are different than the pots that's on the board, but I'm sure that they'll fit, so no problems there, I won't think. So we're going to take a look at the board and look it over and see if we can find any problems that might be with the board before we get started. Okay, well, we're going to install the cap kit in this monitor. We're going to start with the deflection board here. I like to get everything laid out to where I need it. I usually take my cap kit and I sort out all my caps and I put them in order as they are on the list and just line them up on the table here. Of course, you got to have a good soldering iron, and it helps to have a good desoldering station. And even though you got a desoldering station there, I find a lot of times it helps to have good old desoldering brad, just to clean up some of the traces. And of course, you need a good quality solder. This stuff here I got from Radio Shack, 6040 rosin core at .032 diameter. Pretty good stuff here. So let's get started, and it's not too many caps on the deflection board itself, and I believe the high voltage unit has a couple of them in it. We're also going to install the adjustment pot kit, but we'll do that after we install the caps. So let's get started. Okay, well, we're going to start with the 1 microfarad 50 volt capacitors at location C500, C501, C502, and C503. It turns out that these capacitors, here's C500 right here, these are titanium capacitors. But titanium capacitors have a plus and a minus side, just like an electrolytic. So we're going to replace them with the electrolytics which came in the kit. So we'll start with C500 right up here. And I love it when they just fall right off the board. And a lot of people like to take them all off the board and then put them all back on, but I don't like doing it that way. I prefer to do it one at a time, and as I do it, I put a circle around the number on the sheet here. That way I know that that one has been replaced and I won't get mixed up. And I like to double check them, make sure. These are 1 microfarad at 50 volt, and these are 105 degree Ritchie capacitors, so they ought to be pretty good capacitors. Alright, and it does have a plus and minus, and it is marked plus and minus on the board on both sides. And you want to always make sure that when you take it out, especially on electrolytics, you want to make sure the direction that they're in, and also look at the board to make sure they're correctly marked, because there have been some cases like the G07 monitor where actually one side of the silk screen is wrong, and they got it backwards. So you always got to be aware of that. Okay, and on a capacitor electrolytic, usually you got a long lead and a short lead. The long lead is usually the positive lead, but you'll know the negative lead because it has this stripe on the negative side. So, that said, put this in, and I usually bend one leg over and leave one side sticking up. Then I take my solder and I'll solder the one leg that's sticking up. Then I'll straighten up the other leg and I'll solder it. Because I like to have my lead sticking straight up. I hate it when somebody puts a component in, clips the legs and bends them over. Unless you're trying to repair a trace where the trace might be broken and extended the trace, it's okay to do that. But they're a pain in the butt to get off when somebody bends them over and then solders them. Okay, then we take our side clippers here and just cut them off flush. First one down. That was C500. So I'll take and I'll circle C500. Now we do 501. 501 is all the way down here on the other end of the board. And the board appears to be marked correctly. And there's that one. And this one is also a 1 microfarad at 50 volts. Number 2 down, and that was 501, C501. Now C502, C502 is right here. I love it when they fall out. There it is right there. Alright, another 1 microfarad at 50 volts. Solder. Clip the leads. I already marked that one down. Next is C502. No, actually that was 502. That was the third one. C503. C503 is right beside that one that we just did. There it is. Alright, this is the last 1 microfarad at 50 volts. Positive and negative. C503. That's 4 down. Alright, now we got 2. That's a 2.2 at 50 volts. Alright, and that's at 603, C603. And here it is right there. That one right here. So, we have to find it on the bottom of the board. There it is right there. C603. And there it is right there. That had a 2.2 at 50 volts in it. Alright, here's a 2.2 at 50 volts. Going back in. Some of them don't like to hold in very well. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and solder hold that one down while I solder it. I can pull this one up, solder this one. Alright, can circle 603 off. Now we're going to do 703. It's over here next to this neon tube here, a neon light bulb. 703. That one fell out and hit the floor. That's okay, we don't need it. 2.2 at 50 volts. 2.2 at 50 volts. Same deal on this one. I have to hold this wire down to hold it up in place while I feed it solder here to get the other one in. down, straighten this one up. I don't like the way that one was looking, so I'll take a little bit of the solder back off of it. Okay, that looks good. Evidently that one is critical, both of those, so that they don't get a solder bridge between them, because they have like part of the board is etched off in between them to make sure that they won't get a solder bridge across them, which is another thing you want to make sure you don't do. You don't want to put so much solder on the way you're going to get a solder bridge. Okay, C703, that's done. Now, don't know if there's any more on this board. The rest of these might be on a high voltage board, but because they're higher numbers. C907, well, we got the C502, C504. Let's just see if there's any more on here. You know, I don't really see any more on here. 605, that's not electrolytic. That's no good. Found out this heat sink is loose on that. Have to tighten that up. Well, unless I'm just blind, I don't see any more on this board. The rest of them must be in a high voltage cage. So we're done with the capacitors on here. It would have been nice if they had separated them on the list here and told you which ones were on which board, but that's okay. I guess it doesn't really matter. I guess they figure you'll figure it out. Alright, so now I guess we'll go ahead and put the replacement pots on here. So let me get those out and look it over and find the positions on them. Okay, well, let's install the trim pots on the deflection board here. And this is a Bob Roberts kit, and it has 4 pots: a contrast, a brightness, a linear adjustment, 2 linear adjustments, I guess one for X and one for Y. And the contrast is a 500 ohm, the brightness is 100 ohm, and the linear adjustments are 2K ohm or 2000 ohm. Now, the pots have numbers on them, and it's a code, and I went ahead and figured it out. It tells you here, Bob Roberts has a nice little write-up here that tells you how to figure out the code on the pots so that you know which is which. instead of writing it out and telling you what it is, he makes you think and makes you learn something, which is good. Always good to learn something if you didn't already know this. So let's take, for instance, the contrast pot, which is 500 ohms, which is this one right here, which has 501 on it. 501. And what you do is you look at the first two numbers, and then the third number you add to however many zeros it is. So this one here has a 501, so that's 50, and then you add another 0 to it, and that's 500. And the next one here, which is a 100k ohm, it's got 104 on it. So the first two numbers is a 1 and 0, so that's a 10, and then you add 4 more zeros behind the 10, and you get 100,000 ohms, or 100k. So that's basically how it works, in case you didn't know. Okay, well, we're going to start with the contrast pot, and okay, let's find the contrast pot here. And here it is right here, R514. And here's the pot right here. So as you can see, it's a 500 ohm pot, and this is the replacement pot, and it's a lot smaller than that pot right there. And the way it's made, this one will go on the board so that your adjustment tool goes straight in this way, where this one you could put an adjustment in it this way, but you got so much stuff on the board here, you'd probably have to use your fingers and turn the outside edge of this wheel here. So anyway, maybe that's better because you can get in here with the tool to adjust it. I don't know. Well, maybe these pots aren't available anymore. Don't know what the reasoning for it is, but we're going to change them anyway. Alright. So we'll start with this one, R514 for the contrast. There it is. Alright. So that's 501. This is it right here. Alright, let's see if it fits. And guess what? It doesn't fit. Well, that's disappointing, because this is a V2000 board, and this was a V2000 deflection board replacement pot kit. But it is very obvious that these pots won't fit. So, for the time being, I'm going to have to put this back in and figure out how come those don't fit. What's the deal here? I mean, I have a G05 deflection board here, and well, even the brightness pot on that is one of these big pots, but these pots here for the linear adjustments are very similar to these pots here. They're a little different, but they're still very similar. But yeah, and this one here is missing the contrast pot. It's gone off of this board. Looks like somebody has robbed some parts off of this anyway. Looks like this might have been a parts board. Several transistors gone off of this one, so this would be a good parts board. But we're not working on that board, we're working on this board. So like I say, I'm going to have to figure out what's going on with that. So we'll just leave the pots in here for the time being and solder them back on. Okay, well I guess we're going to move on to the high voltage board now. Okay, now we're going to move to high voltage assembly. And it's got 4 screws here, 1/4 inch screws. And we'll just remove the screws out of the unit here. And one last one here. Alright, now we can slide the high voltage unit out, and it has one harness here that hooks up to it. We'll just unplug it, and now we have the unit here. So now we can set the monitor tube and chassis aside and pull this apart. Okay, and we got 2 screws here holding the cage on. So we'll take these off. Set that aside. Now we can look inside, and everything looks intact. The high voltage diode where it hooks up looks okay, and the flyback doesn't appear to have any broken wires on the bottom of it, or it's not burnt. So that's a good thing, because you can't get those anymore. Okay, so now what we have to decide, are we going to go ahead and pull the board out, so, or just put the capacitors in and leave it attached to the housing here. Well, if I took it out, then I would have to also disconnect the wires to the transistors on both sides. And I'd have to disconnect that diode there, which I don't want to do right now, because I may not have to mess with it if it's good and it's working. So I think I'm just going to work around and put the what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 capacitors. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 capacitors. I think I'm just going to go ahead and do it right inside the housing. I don't know how everybody else does it, but I think I can make that work. Alright, so let's do that. Let me get my list back out here. And I'll start with C907. Alright, 907. There's a 4.7 microfarad at 60 volts. 4.7 at 160. The replacement is 250, so that'll work. If I can find it on the board here. 907. Okay, there it is right there. C907. All right. Alright, I'll solder this one on. Alright, C907 is done. Now C504, which is a 22 at 250. 22 at 250. Alright. 504. I'm not seeing a 504 in here. Here's the C900. C905, and there ain't a C905, I got a 904. I wonder if this is a G05 high voltage unit. Nothing on it that says one way or the other. I have a 904 Okay, I got 904. Got 907, I just did that one. That was correct. I don't see a C504. Maybe that is on a deflection board then. That is strange. Okay, I do have a 904. So let me pull that one out. Alright, 904, so 47 at 50 volts, and that's correct. .47 at 50 volts. Alright, so I did 904, C900, and 901. Okay, there's C900, and there's 901. So those are in here. Alright, so let's do C900. Alright, that's a 1000 at 50 volts. And 1000 at 50 volts. Definitely a lot smaller than the replacement, than the original. Okay, C900. Now C901. 1,050 volts. 1,050 volts. Alright, well that's all the caps in here except for this radio cap, which looks like it might be a poly, some high voltage type cap. Okay, well that looks like everything in here. This other one must be on a deflection board. I must have missed one, so let me look over the deflection board and see if I can find out where C504 goes. Okay, you're going to laugh at me for this, and I'm laughing at myself. Here it is right here. How I missed it, I don't know. Besides the two filter capacitors, it's the biggest capacitor on the board. C504, right here. Go figure. Alright, well let's go ahead and take it off. Alright, 22 microfarads at 160 volts. 22 microfarads at 250 volts. So it's a much higher voltage capacitor going to replace it. But that's okay. That'll work. Alright. Okay, after looking at this closer, it looks like that these two pots right here for RS600 and RS700, these look like will fit. But the pots that are in the kit for the brightness and the contrast, well, it's no way that they'll physically fit. They're just completely different. So evidently two of these pots are wrong in the kit, unless there's another board. I know there are two versions of this board, and maybe the other version uses all the same pots. I don't know, but I do know this is a V2000 board, and that these two pots won't fit. So I may go ahead and change out the two that will fit and just leave these in here. And if they seem to be a problem once I get the monitor going, then I'll just have to order the correct pots to go in here. Okay, well since I'm confident that these two pots are going to work in these two positions here, we're going to go ahead and change those. So let's go ahead and desolder pots, and we'll start with R600 here. Okay, we have the pot out. And it definitely looks like it will line up. So we'll stick the new one in. And we'll solder them. That one's done. Now let's get the other one, which is R700 right here. And find the terminals. There they are. Yep, I lost them again. Okay, there we go. Almost fell out on its own. There it is. And put this one back in. And it's a little hard to get to with all these wires in the way. Okay. Okay, well that replaces those two pots anyway. Like I say, these aren't going to fit, so I don't know why that is. But if I need to replace them, I'll have to find some replacements somewhere. Okay, next thing we're going to do is resolder the pins on these connectors here. And we're going to suck the old solder off of them and apply new solder to all of them. Now, can't do it right now because I'm going to have to change the tip on my desoldering iron here because the pins are pretty sure a little bit too big. Yeah, I'm going to have to put the bigger tip on it. So we'll have to let it cool down to do that, so we'll have to come back to it. Now we're going to replace the deflection transistors. I have my new transistors here, my heatsink compound, and new insulators to go between the transistors and the frame of the monitor. I took the printed out the page from the manual here that shows the position of each one of the transistors here and tells me which number it is and which one goes in it. And I went ahead and labeled them. Like this one is Q708, takes a 2N3716. Here's Q709, takes a 2N3792, and well, did the other two there. So all four are labeled, so I won't be able to get mixed up on what goes back in there. So now we'll just go ahead and take a Phillips screwdriver, and we'll take each one of them out one at a time. And before I put them back in, I'll compare it to a new one and see if there's any shorts in it. These look like they may be the originals, just like the deflection board had never been recapped before. So it's a possibility. But we're going to change them out anyway. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. Well, we'll start with Q708 here. The screws wasn't all that tight. And let's see. They should just plug right in and pull right out. Alright. There's not a whole lot of heatsink compound on there, and it's definitely dry. So it's been in there quite a few years, I would imagine. Alright, well this is a 2N3716. So here's our new 2N3716. Alright, well let's put the first one back in. And we'll just take a little bit of our heatsink compound. Put a little dab on there. Take our insulator. We'll take and put another little dab on this side. Alright, and they only go in one way. I imagine you could force them in there, but they're a little bit off center from the ears. So that's the direction they go in. So we just get them lined up, push them in, and then line the screws back up. Snug them back up. And that one is done. Now what we can do, check to make sure we don't have any shorts. So we'll put our meter on continuity test and put it on the bottle cap and on the chassis here. you shouldn't get any reading. And we don't. So we're good to go. Alright, let's go ahead and get the other three. Okay, well that does it for all 4 transistors. We'll just check and make sure none of them are shorted to the case here. And none of them are shorted to the case. So we should be good to go on that. Well, as I noted earlier, we do have a couple of cracked solder joints on these header pins here. So we're going to desolder the pins, or remove some of the solder from the pins, and add new solder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and first remove the solder from all the pins on the inside and leave the 2 outer pins. That'll make sure that the pin, or the connector, the header pins stay in place, because I don't really want to be removing them unless I'm going to replace them. So then we'll solder all those back, and then we'll do the 2 end ones last on each one. So go ahead and get them done here. Okay, those are removed. And while I'm at it, let me just go ahead and get the rest of these. Okay, got some of those. Now we'll come back and we'll solder those up. And I like to use my magnifying visor so I can check all the pins out, make sure they're clean, see if I need to add any flux to them, and make sure that any ones that are tied together, so I know whether or not I have a solder bridge or not. All these seem to be separate. So let's go ahead and solder them up here. Okay, moving on to the next set of pins. Okay, now we can go ahead and get the outer pins. They look okay. So we'll go ahead and solder those. Alright, that should be all the pins. That looks like all of them. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, since this heat sink is loose on the rectifier, and that seems to be a big problem on this DB100, I'm going to go ahead and replace that rectifier. So go ahead and unsolder it. I believe my gun is stopping up here, so I'm going to take a break and clean it out. Be right back. Alright, there it is. Got that out. And we're going to replace it with ECG 5313, which is 200 volt at 8 amps. So we'll go ahead and take this heat sink off here. It's a smaller Phillips screwdriver. This is just a heat sink. It's not doesn't have any type of insulation under it. Just needs to make thermal contact to dissipate the heat. The new one here. Terminals look a little corroded. Well, that could be some type of compound, I guess, to keep them from corroding. Don't know. Alright. Well, this is marked on the board right here. Here's the corner. And it's got a cut corner on here, so it should go that way. And if it does, then the markings under the board here should be AC plus, yes, that's correct. Okay, so all we have to do is line it up. Now all we have to do is put this back on. Again, a little more to heat sink compound. All the pictures I've seen of this mounted always has the parted heatsink towards the edge of the board here, so we'll put it on that way. Alright, good and tight. Now all we have to do is put it down in the board. The screw is real long, and I'm assuming that that's so that when you put it in, it'll set the height and hold it up off of the board, just like that. That should be fine. But it's probably not going to hold itself in. Probably going to have to set something underneath it here. So all we have to do is find something the right height. this will do. Alright, we'll solder one in place, and then we'll be able to set the angle and get it even all the way around it. Okay, now we ought to be able to just adjust it however we want it. That looks good. Alright, now we just clip the leads off here. Alright, and it looks like we're all done, ready. Only one more thing to do. I'm going to pull these fuses out and clean these fuse clips, because they did look like they were a little corroded. After we do that, it'll be ready to install back in the monitor, and we can hook it up to my Asteroids multigame and see if we have a working monitor. Well, we've got one more thing to do here. On the high voltage unit, I'm going to reflow the, first remove the solder from the pins, just like we did on a deflection board, and add new solder to it. Alright, we'll blow some new solder in the pins. Okay, now we'll get the remaining two on the ends. Okay, that should do it. Now we can put the high voltage unit and the deflection board back in the monitor chassis. Alright, first we're going to put the high voltage unit back in, and the plug that goes into the bottom here is keyed, so it only goes in one way. So we got that on. And I put it back in the cage, and it goes on these holes right here. Get it in the right hole. No, I believe I got it in the wrong hole. I believe it goes in that hole. Alright, let's see if that lines up better now. Nope. It's the wrong hole too. I know that's a hole. Okay, I never had this much trouble trying to get something to line up. Okay, and looks like it does go in this hole. Which is kind of weird. I can tell one was in that one. So the other one looks like it goes in this one. And I believe it does. Okay. Well, I got that sorted out. Alright, high voltage unit's back on. Now we'll go ahead and put this deflection board back in. Now it originally only had one screw in it, so I found another screw the same size and I put a washer on it. So hopefully that's going to work out. And let's see if I remember correctly. I believe it went in this way. So I think it slides in that back bracket. And then screws go in this one. Okay. Now you can put, well, no, there's holes back here, but this bracket that it slides in is too close to it, so they don't get screws in it. Alright. Now all we have to do is make sure we plug everything back up in the correct place. And I know this one goes here. Up out the way, and I'm pretty sure this one goes right here. Those plugs to make sure they look okay. It looks okay. And this one then back here, hopefully. Okay. And last but not least, the yoke. Plugs in right there. Okay. Last thing is the anode connection for the high voltage. And let me see if I can get this around here where you can see it. Get this up high enough. Whoa! Definitely don't want that to happen. Alright, that's going to show up too good on the camera, but alright. Well, anyway, it's just a little spring clip, and it's got two little tabs on the back side. You kind of squeeze it together, and it hooks in to the side there. And that's it. Well, the monitor is ready to hook up and try. All I got to do now is move some of these games around so I can wheel my Asteroids multi-game over here to plug it in, and we'll find out if we're going to get a picture or smoke and fire. Okay, well, here it goes. Got my Asteroids multi-game. I've unplugged the monitor here, and I've plugged in the monitor we just finished rebuilding. So now we're going to turn it on and see what happens. First time firing it up. Okay, I got neck glow. Don't see any smoke or flames yet. Hear deflection. At least I think it sounds like deflection. But nothing on the tube yet. But I do have neck glow. Alright, could be the brightness and contrast. It's not adjusted correctly. Could be it doesn't have any high voltage. I don't feel any static on the screen. So I'm betting there's no high voltage. But it does sound like we have deflection chatter. Yeah, definitely we got deflection chatter. And we definitely have neck glow in the tube. Nothing on the board is smoking. Alright, time to break out the high voltage probe and see what's going on. Okay, well, we have the high voltage probe hooked up here. Let's hit the button and see what we're getting. Alright, we're getting 12,000 volts. This monitor I think is supposed to be up around 14, but the regular G05 is 12. So maybe the brightness isn't turned up enough. Okay. Okay, well, I turned up the brightness and we now have a picture. But it's oversized and backwards. Probably because this was in an Asteroids Deluxe. I was thinking that the screen was reversed in Asteroid Deluxe because of a jumper on the PC board. I might be wrong. I'm going to have to look that up. Might have to switch the yoke wires around. But the reason I'm pretty sure the picture is too wide is because I put new linear pots in it. So I'm going to have to adjust those linear pots. So let me go ahead and adjust those and see if I can't get it down to where it's supposed to be. Okay, well, I got my trusty ceramic adjusting tool, and let's cut the game on. Okay, and there's our picture. And let's see if we can do some adjusting. Both of these new pots, I put them kind of in the middle. I'm not sure which is which, so we'll just start with one and see what happens. Ah, yes, that's one we need right there. Wow, that's all the way down. But that might do it. Now let's try the other one. Alright, I'm not exactly sure where the edge is. I'm going to have to wait for it to get back here. Yeah, it's wrapping around too much. Alright, that's all the way down too. And I believe it's starting to stretch out, so this might have a blooming problem. Might have the high voltage diode is bad. Now I noticed on the schematics, those linear pots are marked on the schematic as 1.5 K, I believe. Yes, it's blooming on out. They're marked as 1.5 K, and the Bob Roberts kit had 2K pots. Now, I don't know if that's going to be a problem. It may be a problem because if it affects the adjustment in the other direction. But yeah, it's definitely steady blooming as it warms up. So I'm thinking I have a problem with the high voltage rectifier. And I believe I have 2 of those in stock if they use the same one as the G05 does. I bought them probably 10 years ago, and so I'm going to have to check that and see. Okay, well I do have a SK7330, and I hope that'll work. What we're going to have to do is try to get this out without messing anything up. Hopefully it's just going to, if I pull on it, yeah, it'll just pop right out. Good. Okay. And if you look at it real close here, let me see if I can get it in the camera. The ends of the wires are just clipped right off even with the end. I wonder if it's a spring clip in there. Let's see if I can tell. I'll bring this one out. Yeah, it's definitely got a little spring in there, like the spring in the end of a battery holder. And I'm assuming, yeah, the other one's got one too. Okay, so I ought to be able to stick that in, so let me see what I can figure out on that. Okay, well I done bent the leads on the end of the new high voltage diode so that the spring hopefully will make contact on it, and I've cleaned them up. Had a little corrosion on them, they're so old, and also cleaned the springs up on the inside of the boots. And the band on the diode goes towards the anode cup on the CRT. So let's go ahead and install it here. So this is the anode cup that goes on the CRT, so the band end goes on this end here. So I'll go ahead and put that in first. That's a good tight fit. That's good. And now I'm going to have to slide this back through. And now be careful because I don't want to break this wire here. Go ahead and put this end in. Alright, that's got to be in far enough. But I could see that end was pulling back off of it. So, I think what it needs is a tie strap on this to keep it from pulling out. Let me see if I can find one handy here. Okay, well, I took a couple tie straps and tied them together and put them around the holder on both sides, so that ought to hold it together pretty good, keep it from coming apart. Okay, well, it's all ready to fire up again. Hopefully we're not going to see any fire. So here goes. Okay, well, at least we got a high voltage, and the picture definitely looks smaller than it was before, even with the same adjustments. So now we'll just let it stay on and see if it starts blooming. Hopefully with the new diode in there it'll be just fine. I think the contrast looks like it's about right, and the brightness looks bright enough. Of course, Red Baron gets the blue gel over it, so it may have to crank up just a little bit. Don't know. But what we can do is just see what our high voltage is running at. We'll put a probe back on here. My non-metallic ceramic screwdriver here to get the edge of this up, because I can't get the high voltage probe underneath it. Whoa, yeah. Okay, I'm getting one mark over 12. So it's definitely more high voltage than it was. Let's see what this is on this scale. 12, the next is 24. Okay, well, I was getting a high voltage reading. It was one mark over the 12, and the next is 24. So going by this scale right here, each mark is 2k volts. So that means I'm reading 14,000 volts. And I think it's supposed to be like 14.5. So with this scale right here, that seems to be right in the range where it's supposed to be. So I don't think I'm going to have a problem now with the high voltage. The only thing I have to deal with now is the reversed image on the monitor. And I was reading the Vector Monitor Frequently Asked document that's floating around the web, and it says that normally in like Asteroids Deluxe and Battle Zone, the wires are reversed on the harness, not the monitor itself. The only exception might be, I believe, Omega Race. But anyway, this monitor has Asteroids Deluxe burn-in. I'm pretty sure it's Asteroids Deluxe. And when I hooked it up to my Asteroids here, the image is backwards. So I got looking and reading in that document, it says that sometimes people do, change it at the monitor rather than the harness. So I got to looking, and it says it's you're supposed to reverse pins 1 and 2 on P700. Well, that's the only mistake in the document. If you look at this, that's P701. So, but they got the information correct. Pin 1 is on the right-hand side. So if we look at the plug here, pin 1 is the yellow connector, and the pin 2 right next to it is black. Well, on my Asteroids monitor, the G05, I just looked in there, and black is on pin number 1, and the yellow is on pin number 2. So all I'm going to have to do is reverse the yellow and black positions, pin 1 and pin 2, and that should straighten it out. But I just wanted to point out that in that documentation, this connector is labeled wrong. They got it labeled as P700, and it's supposed to be P701. So let's go ahead, and all we have to do is pull these two terminals out and switch them over, and we should be good to go. Alright, well, let's go ahead and change these two pins around. And all we have to do is press in this little tab. And it'll slide right out. So we got that one out. Now the yellow is in pin 1, so we want yellow in pin 2 and the black in pin 1. So let's get the black one out. Okay, now what you have to do is you need to bend these little pins back up so that when you push them back in, they'll lock in. Sometimes they press down in there and they won't lock. So you have to re-bend them back out unless you're going to replace the pins. Okay, got them bent back out. So now all we have to do, sort these wires out here a little bit. Is put the yellow in pin slot number 2 and put the black in pin slot number 1. Okay, now all we've got to do is plug it back in, and our monitor should be the right orientation now. Okay, let's fire it up and see what happens. And there we go. The picture is now correct. So switching the yoke wires around did the trick. Now I let the monitor run a couple hours last night, and so far I haven't seen any problems with it. I'll need to throw the test pattern up on there to get it sort of adjusted in, get the size correct on there, but I think it's looking pretty close to where it should be. It may need a little tweak, but it's got a nice clear lines on it, so I believe it's going to be okay. So now we can go ahead and got the monitor fixed. We can go ahead and probably move the game in here, install the monitor, and then get the boards in it.
Achtung, jetzt wir singen zusammen die Geschichte über den Schweinkopf in Hund.